gal. Welcome to Book World, The Great Escape. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 1 o'clock Central Time. I am one of your co-hosts, CJ Peterson, co-hosting with my author Michael Scott Clifton. And Mike, how was your weekend?
It was a tiring one. As we were talking earlier, I've got a pretty big garden patch, and I have been picking peas and tomatoes and cantaloupes and the Texas heat, which is
See,
always
and
a fun experience.
as I said earlier, your garden is doing so much better than ours. Ours has been attacked by cats and rabbits, and yeah, it has not done well.
Well, it hasn't done as well as it normally does because, as anyone who lives around East Texas knows, we've had a very hot, dry summer so far, extremely hot.
Yeah, my
And
joke is that we were already on Satan's front porch in the beginning of June. Eventually, we're going to end up come July and August.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm just a little bit nervous. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little nervous because we've already reached temperatures of 100, and it's not even
Yeah.
July.
We're getting August heat and weather in June, and that's never a good thing.
No, that's scary. Like there are literal sections of our lawn that are frying. My poor husband keeps trying to water them, but I don't know how long he's going to be able to do that for. We're already under a burn ban in our area.
Well, it could be worse. My son lives in Abilene, and my daughter lives in Cleburne. In Cleburne, they've been having temperatures around 104, and my son, I think, said they reached 108 here just this past week. So pretty hot.
It's just not cool.
No,
It's wrong.
it's like living in the Sahara Desert.
Yes. Now, one thing I did do this weekend was I have a book that's due to the editor coming soon. And so I spent almost my entire weekend writing it. I'm usually pretty good at my deadlines, but this one's a little bit last minute for me, I will admit, and was not intentional, but that's how it ended up working. And so it's going to be going to the editor in a few days after Trevor and I read it, and I'm very excited about it. It's about time travel, where they purposely go back to actually change their family line and the family history. It's an intentional butterfly effect and watching the chain reaction that happens throughout their family tree.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I also just, as I told you about 10 minutes ago, finished my short story for the Texas Sisters Press anthology for Christmas this year. So for those who are either authors or writers or wannabe authors, Texas Sisters Press is running their short story anthology. This is our third year we're going to be going for it. You do not have to be published to enter. You do not get paid for your story, but we do retain the rights for till July of the following year. And you get to participate in a huge, gigantic book launch with all the other authors. So there's a lot of cross promotion that comes along with it. You also get the author copies. You get copies at author price plus shipping and everything on it. So we're not making a lot of money outside of the ones bought by the authors. We make them for those sold over and above. And that's basically to cover our cost of publishing for the year. But the short stories we've gotten have been very unique, and we love unique stories. We've gotten let's see, there was funny stories about St. Peter from DC Gomez. We've gotten a Kaiju Christmas was one year, Santa versus Satan. There was a psychotic elf. There was speed dating that somehow pertains. They did that. There's been a lot of very unique ones, and I love unique stories. One thing I like to do is I tend to tie in the short stories to one of my other stories. So, for example, this year I tied it into the book that's actually launching in August. You don't have to. You can read them separately, but if you put them together, it's a very cool present to enjoy.
Wow. Well, as we were talking earlier, I've been saying this for like 6 months, but my fourth and last book in the Conquest of the Veil series, which is titled Cavern of the Veil Queen, is within just a week or two of being finished finally.
Yay!
And it is something I'm very happy with. It's taken me a lot longer than I thought to get this last 5% done. if you've ever written series as you have, CJ, it's not quite as easy as people might think, because when you get to that last book, and when you especially get to the end and
Mhm.
you're tying all of those pieces together, you've got to be sure that you've not left anything out. Everything is consistent, and it ends in a way that the reader obviously logically can, well, maybe not so logically expect, but without any holes left in it.
Mhm.
And
And end
it's
on a high. I hate it
right,
when you're, like, taken
right,
through this series and the last book is, like, a dud. That's kind of
right,
like Lost,
right.
that last season when I found out, oh, it was they were caught in purgatory the whole time. It's like, "Seriously? I watched all of this and was so engrossed in it for this kind of ending?" So, yeah, nailing that ending for a series or for a series of serieses, for example, my Team Angel series was, like, 13 books, 14
Oh
books?
yeah.
And so I had to hit that last one on a good note. And so for you, your series is spanned over what, 4 years?
It actually started. I'm actually going to write a blog about this, about
Mhm,
how this whole series started. But I, the initial idea when I started writing was 2005, I think it was, that uh, the actual writing of the books. You're right. It started 4 years ago,
mhm.
about one book a year, in the series, and those, I've had a lot of people who like the series have asked me, and I feel kind of bad because, okay, at the end of May, then it was end of June, end of July. Well, I'm 99% sure that August it will finally be a date that can release this fourth and final book, and it'll be, you know, and I think it's a great end. I think it's a great book. I think it's the best one of the four. So if you like the Conquest of Vale series, you'll really like the last book.
Good.
Um, so anyway,
So today is book review day. So
yep.
what is your book? We'll start with you.
Okay, so a familiar author. I'm sure many of the readers will recognize. Let me see if I can get this. Can you see that clearly,
Mhm.
CJ?
Well, semi with the green screen adds a little bit to be desired, but that's
Okay,
okay. I'm putting the link
okay.
in the chat.
So this is The Wish by Nicholas Sparks, and I have a long-standing love-hate relationship with Nicholas Sparks, uh, because I don't like his tragic endings, which he seems to, not necessarily every one of his books he writes, but it seems like too many. The Notebook, which was the first book I ever read by Nicholas Sparks, remains to this day one of the best books I've ever read. I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily a romance reader, but I do like a good story, and whether regardless of genre. And Sparks writes very good, I would say, love stories uh, with characters that we can all readily identify with, and his perspective from it, I think follows more what normal people would do with normal situations and normal lives, which is why I like it. I like his writing. I like the stories he tells. So now, to before I start, most if you're not familiar with Nicholas Sparks, and of course, I think almost all of his books have been made into movies. In fact, I think he has his own production company that produces movies from the books that he writes.
Smart man. That's smart marketing.
Yeah. So he uh, he has become more formulaic in
Mhm,
his later books uh, than his earlier books. The stories are still unique, but he follows a pattern. And here, the last three or four or five, half a dozen books uh, that I've read by Sparks, he likes to start in the present
mhm,
with a character or characters, and the problem, the conflict uh, is almost immediate. It's identified almost immediately,
mhm,
and then he shifts to in a way where he goes back in time Uh, for example, uh, I think one of his books is called The Long Ride,
Mhm.
and that was a couple years ago that came out, and a movie made of it had Clint Eastwood's son, is it Stephen Eastwood, or I'm not quite sure about that, was in it. But in there, you have a gentleman who lived in the town where the two characters lived, who was married to his wife, and he would write her letters and postcards.
Mhm.
And that's flashback to the past, and it goes through their life together. This character, 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Mhm.
And then we go back to the present where his paths cross with the two other characters. And that's kind of how he's done it with a lot of his last 5 or 6 books. He'll start in the present. The conflict, the problem presents itself almost immediately. And then it's flashbacks to where the main character started from and how he got to this point today, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Um, and he generally does it through some sort of written communication. So it's letters, it's postcards,
Mhm.
it's uh, it's writing on the back of a photograph. But it's always done where there's some form of writing, old fashioned writing by hand, not something that you printed out on a computer or something like that. And I kind of like that. Uh, because it goes back to the way the way people used to communicate back and forth, and that's how he tells the story. But uh, there's always flashback, and there's always a some sort of document, letter, loves writing on a picture that sort of explains it as you go along in the story. So in the Wish,
Mhm.
okay, uh, we have a similar situation. It starts out with a 16-year-old girl living in Seattle, Washington. Her name's Maggie,
Mhm.
and she's a typical teenager going to high school and doing things that teenage girls do, going to the mall, going to the movies, hanging out with friends, that sort of thing. And one day, there's one of her friends has a cousin that visits from California. Typical surfer dude, blonde and tan, very handsome. And of course, he's 2 or 3 years older than they are, than she is. And of course, she falls head over heels with him, and uh, he doesn't really pay her any attention. And he's hanging out with him for a couple of weeks, and then one day she's alone with her her friend's cousin, and he invites her to go out on a date, which surprises her. And she, oh, yeah, great, let's do it. And she goes out. One thing leads to another. Okay. And a month later, she's throwing up every morning.
Oh no.
And this continues to the point where her mother finds out about it, takes her to the doctor. She does the pee test, and oops, we're preggers.
Mhm.
And now this is like 20 years earlier.
Mhm.
Okay. So all this is taking place 20 years prior to when the story progresses. So, so they're Catholics. They don't believe in abortion. So they send Maggie to live with her aunt in Ocracoke, North Carolina, which is an actual place. It's an island off the coast of North Carolina. And
Interesting.
they send her there to live with her aunt to give birth to the baby. Her aunt and her aunt's best friends are both midwives, so they're and uh, her aunt is her dad's sister, and so they're gonna let her go there, not tell anybody about her pregnancy, and then when she gives birth to the baby, the plan is to give it up for adoption and uh, and then she'll come back to Seattle, and no one the wiser pick up her life where she left off pre-pregnancy. Well, it's a Nicholas Sparks book. We, okay, you have a
Which means that she doesn't
16
work
year old
that
girl. Yeah. So what do you think's going to happen when she goes to Ocracoke? Well, she meets a handsome young man that's a couple of years older than her, 18-year-old called Bryce Trickett, who's planning on enrolling in West Point at the end of the year. About the same time, she's going to give birth and go back to Seattle.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the background. Well, in the present time in the story, Maggie is now 41 years old. Okay, so that's back then. Now we're present time. Maggie's 41 years old, and she is a renowned travel photographer.
Mhm.
Uh, she has her own studio in New York City, and it's a very successful studio that she shares with a graphic art with a artist, who's and they sell pieces and they do a pretty good business. She
Mhm.
travels the world taking photographs of exotic locations and is very much a world traveler. Uh, but on one of her travels, she's at this beach, like in Bermuda or someplace like that, and she's taking pictures. And a group of tourists go by, including a husband and wife. And the wife mentions something to her about a spot on her neck,
Uh-huh.
and she says you need to go back when you get home and have that checked. And turns out the this woman is a dermatologist doctor. So when she gets back, she checks and she finds out she has stage 4 melanoma.
Oh no.
So her the clock's ticking on her life. So I don't want to tell any more about it if you uh, because it would kind of give away the story. But it, if you know Nicholas Sparks, you know that there will be some tragedy involved. Okay, he tries to soften that with how do you put this? With relationships and events that sort of soften it so that it's not, there's good with the bad, so to speak. Uh, but it's really two stories in one. It's Maggie's life at 16 when she becomes pregnant and her experiences with Bryce and on Ocracoke, and then it's her adult her adult persona at age 41 who has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it does have a very good twist at the end
Mhm.
that I usually can see coming,
Mhm.
but I did not see this one. So it was pleasant. I was pleasantly surprised.
Good.
And I think readers who enjoy books such as the ones that Nicholas Sparks writes will enjoy it as well.
Awesome.
So I give it a 4.5 stars out of five, and the half I'm taking back because like I said, I have a love hate relationship with Nicholas Sparks. So, let's have an old fashioned, you know, good feeling end without having tragedy all the time. Nicholas, if you're
Gotcha.
watching, that's my suggestion. Okay, just occasionally do that.
Just occasion once in a while, break
Yeah,
from the formula. Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Well, mine today is going to be The Bones of Amoret by author Arthur Hubert. Author Herbert. Um, Now, this book is written basically in a small town called Amoret in West Texas. And the way I titled the review for this is in small towns, everybody knows everything about everyone, or do
Hmm.
they? It's West Texas. They can hide a lot. And you follow along with Dr. Grady as, he tells events that happened from this 1982 timeline that kind of still haunt him today. And you go along with these characters and you find out what happened, where, and you're trying to figure out the kind of who done it. But there's a lot of small town shenanigans going on. Let's put it that way. One of them includes a group of men who are helping get people across the border into Amoret and to get them safely through. And it's interesting. Let's put it that way. There's a lot that happens that I didn't see coming. From the author perspective, it's really hard for me to read a book and not predict the ending. When I'm watching shows, it's really hard for me to find a show that I can't predict an ending to. And so that's one of the reasons why I love like Stranger Things. You have no idea where stuff is heading.
Yeah.
And I know that tomorrow on Friday we're getting volume 2, so I'm super excited. But I digress. For the Bones of Amaret, I actually am giving it a 5 star because I literally did not guess it until the very end.
Hmm.
It was one of those that kept me going. I wonder if it's this one. I wonder if it's that one. I wonder if this is why they did it, because I like to try to figure out who did it and why they did it and if it makes sense. And this one I actually read in one sitting, which is
Hmm.
very rare for me. And as I said, it's also very rare for me to not be able to predict the ending. And I was not able to predict the ending. I have my full review. It's up on my Shelf Life blog. Just look for the Bones of Amaret. It has its own little post in there, and just check it out for yourself. It's pretty interesting. I've put in the comments both Nicholas Sparks's book, The Wish, for that link, as well as for the Bones of Amaret. I do know that the Bones of Amaret is only 99 cents on Kindle right now, so it'd be a great summer read if you have a little bit of time. But in the meantime, it's actually a really good book. I don't want to tell too much of it, but a lot goes on in this small town, and a lot you don't expect goes on in this small town. Let's just put it that way. Things you happens that you don't think would happen. So that is kind of the best way I can word it without giving away too much.
Right.
But I would
Well,
definitely give it like an enthusiastic 5 stars because I don't often read a book through in one complete sitting.
and you probably can normally see the plot twist coming. In this case, you said you couldn't, right?
Correct.
So if you're surprised, then definitely the average reader would be as well, which is a
Exactly.
good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I said, it's a really good one. So you have The Wish by Nicholas Sparks for today, and mine is The Bones of Amaret by Arthur Herbert. Again, the links to the books are in the chat for both YouTube and Facebook. I put them both in there manually. So check them out. As far as readers out there, there are lots of books out there to check out. I know Mike has a bunch, I have a bunch, and reviews are super important. If you like what
Sure
you
is.
read, make sure to let the author know. That's the best way to do it, because a lot of times, either on Goodreads or on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble, a lot of times that helps them to jump up to where, they're noticed a little bit more. And that's the best present you could ever give an author.
That's right. Reviews are the mother's milk of reader, and it helps with, as we've said many times before, the algorithms on Amazon
Mhm.
and the search engines when you have multiple reviews.
Mhm. And you can also give back constructive feedback.
Right.
There are times where people are like, a lot of authors, they just don't pay attention to them. A lot of times I'll read through them to see if there's something constructive that I might be able to change for the next one. For example, what you said, Nicholas Sparks, not everything has to have a tragic ending.
No,
Um, for
no,
mine,
it
I
doesn't.
guess you could say that I probably shouldn't kill off a character in each book. Who knows? It's just how things work. So, anyway,
Now
that's
there's some now there's some characters in books that you want to be killed.
yes. So, as Galen Woods always says, some people just need killing.
That's exactly right.
But being literary assassin that I am, there's always spectacular and fantastical ways to be cut out of life. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Did you have to kill off my favorite character? Uh,
My characters, I don't know that I would want to be a character in one of my
yeah.
books. They're pretty they go through a lot.
Yes. It's like wearing the red uniform in the Star Trek movies. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. If you
Don't
can
ever want
come
to wear the red.
through, if you can come through wearing red, then you are like a superhero in Star
That's
Trek.
right. Yeah.
Put it that way. So, well, next week I know we're going to be talking about setting up for book shows. I know
Mhm.
that a lot of
Oh yeah.
authors are like, where do I find book shows? How do I do this? What do I have on my table? We're going to go through and kind of talk about what we have on our table, why we have what we have on our table, and see if we can help you out just a little bit in that area.
Right. Do want to make one last plug before we end our broadcast. This coming Thursday, July 7th, if you're in the East Texas region around Longview, Longview will have its quarterly art walk, the Longview Art
Right.
Walk, which will be in old downtown Longview.
Mhm.
And I'll be at the Vera Bank lobby
Mhm.
uh, with my books. It's from 5 to 8. Patty Wiseman will also be there. Uh, Dana Wayne, aka Nancy Hudgens. Sometimes she's at the Art Walk, sometimes not. I know Patty will be there as well. So if you'd
Mhm.
like some autographed copies of our books,
Mhm.
be sure to come to the Vera Bank lobby, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday, December the 7th.
Nice. And to find out the
This,
exact
this Thursday, July the 7th. Excuse me.
Thursday, December 7th. Um,
Yeah.
to find out the exact address, you can go to Mike's website, www.michaelscottclifton.com, under the appearances section. To find out where I will be next, which will be Comic Conroe at the end of August, head over to cjpetersonwrites.com under the appearances section. In the meantime, again, for those who are authors or who want to be authors, please check out Texas Sisters Press's website. That's TEXASSISTERSPRESS for our call out for the annual holiday anthology. And until next time, next Wednesday at 1 o'clock, we will see you then.
Bye bye.
Bye.